Oh, hello everyone. I am CloudToad at CloudToad on Twitter, and I am your host today on the Enery Labs live stream. Enery Labs is a free and open source project, which with the its only purpose is to teach people about network automation concepts for network engineers, et cetera, et cetera. You can follow that project at Enery Labs on Twitter, and you can go to the website labs.networkreliability.engineering, and you can check out the content for free. There's no marketing wall. You don't have to identify yourself or anything. You can just go there and immediately start learning new stuff. Today we have a very interesting guest. His name is Anthony Mis- Mislovsky. Miloslavsky.
Miloslavsky, yeah,
Yeah,
that was good.
Miloslavsky. We practiced that before we started, and I still managed to screw it up. He's done he not that long ago in Chicago at the Shinog did a really interesting talk on the importance of testing in network automation and the danger of not doing testing. Something I'm also very familiar with. When you don't do testing with network automation, you can really hurt your network badly. It's like the blast radius becomes much bigger and much faster without testing your automation, the automation things that you build. Um, so, having said all that, Anthony, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I started networking actually a while ago in my junior year of high school. My high school happened to be giving out the Cisco Academy courses as part of a required curriculum. So that was kind of my first foray into networking concepts. To be fully honest, I didn't quite follow what they were teaching. I didn't really understand the big picture. I kind of learned isolated facts, so on and so forth, which only many years later I would kind of piece together and fully understand. But it did evolve kind of within me, and it did kind of leave an interest. So that a couple of years later, 3 years later in college, when I had an opportunity to take an internship within an enterprise network team, I was very happy to do so. Got very lucky there, and kind of started getting into networking that way. So fast forward many years, working in various sections of enterprise networking on the customer side. I worked in a couple of financials, and I started kind of slowly as network automation started getting more and more popular, a little bit more and more mainstream. Started getting into it, kind of started following the trends, starting to do some of that on my own, trying to script kind of day-to-day tasks to make my job a little less boring. And at the same time, I got involved in our public cloud project um, for uh, for deploying infrastructure into AWS. And honestly, when I saw what type of automation and how that team was using infrastructure as code to deploy various aspects into AWS, that kind of just doubled down my thinking that this is really it's really interesting to me, and this is what I want to focus on. Taking that focus, I decided to move to the vendor side, just because I wanted to double down on that. Right, I wanted to do automation, at least with more of a focus than I was doing it in my current role. And so when I came to my vendor job and I started working with a lot of different clients and seeing what they're doing on the automation side, that was kind of really the basis for my talk on automated testing. And so I'm sure we can dive into it way deeper, but it seems like automated testing is really an afterthought when it comes to network automation. Just I think last week I was helping a client, deploy some basic automation, and I asked them, "Hey, can we add some automated testing into this, even if it's basic?" And the response I got was just identical that I've seen throughout the industry. This is all so new to me. Why don't we focus on the configuration part first, and we'll do the automated testing part after that? And that's just really been the pattern that I've seen throughout our industry. And I think talking about automated testing, how to do it, it's just it's not that hard to at least get started. and show the effects of it. I think it's important to kind of evangelize.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually, one of the things I've said on I'm certainly on this podcast before, and almost in every presentation I give, is that we spend most of our time actually modeling as network engineers. Like we're trying to build a picture of what is happening or what should be happening or what did happen, right? We're modeling the past, the present, or the future, so that we make the correct choices when we actually go and try to manipulate the system, right? If we don't have a good working model in our head of where we are and where we should be, then then uh, things can go very badly, right? That's the definition of incompetence. We spend a lot of time actually doing a lot of modeling. So it seems if you're only focusing on configuration, it's actually kind of a scary thought, right? The danger that can go with that. I have taken out an entire network way back early in my career. Um, I just focusing only on that and took out 94 branches of a bank, and it took 3 full days of trucks rolling to undo what I did because I just
Wow.
I now it wasn't entirely my fault, but I should have known better before I did that. That at each even if you're doing a lot of people don't get it. This is how important it is, right? Even let's say you have 1,000 devices in your network and they're all the exact same model, the exact same memory, running the exact same iOS. Every single time you should be validating the change you just made on that box, and that make sure you're running the right version of iOS, right? That is in fact the same thing that you tested in the lab before you make the change, and then validate it after you make the change for each and every of those 1,000 devices.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, I could think back to numerous times at my previous, enterprise jobs where, we had to do late night maintenance windows. Usually the more impactful, the more off peak it had to be. Sometimes in the middle of the night on a Saturday. And at those times, if you're a couple hours into troubleshooting something or deploying something, you're not really your head is not fresh in terms of let me check out all the changes I've made. Let me do some due diligence. And further into that, maybe you're 4 hours into it. Your brain is just I want to get out of here as quickly as possible, right? So focusing on automated testing in that environment or in that particular case, I think makes even more sense. It's a no-brainer, right? Humans, they can only go for so long, in terms of looking at things, especially if it's happening manually. So I think there's so many different avenues to look at automated testing, and I personally think they're no-brainers in each section. I think you talked a little bit about automated testing, and I was kind of mentioning that even automation aside, back in my enterprise days when you had to do changes during late night maintenance windows, and sometimes you would be a couple hours into that change. There are many times where I could think that I wish I had some automated testing in my back pocket. Because kind of the later you are at night, we're human after all. The later you are into a maintenance window, the more high stress it is. The more you want to get out of there and kind of get back to normal weekend life. That's really where automated testing can help, right? Just rely on that repeatable task to kind of help you to make sure your change went fine. And I could think of many times where I did all that manually, and obviously many times missed something just because it was all done by hand, and the wee hours of the night.
Yeah, like you said, when you're at your peak mental faculty at 3 in the morning on Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
when you're stressed out because it's not like you're missing a big chunk of your personal life at the same time. By the way, you're perhaps foggy or yeah, peak mental faculty. So automated testing is good because it's some these things are complicated, right? And sometimes it's not just what you're doing on this box; it's like the effect of the box that's connected to that, or a box that's even downstream from that, right? Because it's a network. It's like it's actually one sort of large distributed system.
Yeah.
Like that's isn't that crazy that we still do that? Like there's like
one of the most complicated things in our infrastructure. We decide to do all the most difficult stuff when we have the least amount of brain power.
No, it's it's ironic, and I remember even in change control with these large enterprises, one of the common questions was always, well, how are you going to verify that your change was successful, right? And that kind of leads it into a rabbit hole of its own conversation. But yeah, I mean, automated testing can alleviate so much in those particular situations, and not enough enterprises are getting behind it, in my opinion.
Yeah. So what sort of so you said you sort of gotten into scripting, or you're doing, well, we call it scripting, right? Network
Mhm.
engineers frequently call it scripting, but it's definitely evolved. It's not just scripting anymore. There's a practice around it. So like what sort of languages and tools were you using in the beginning?
Yeah, so I think my very first forays into this was, and this is a decade back, was expect scripting, right? It's kind of the best that we had back then. And I remember, I think one of my first managers actually asked me to build the equivalent of zero touch provisioning, with whatever tools we had back then. That way we can easily provision switches, at least get them on the network, get them with the right iOS image, the right configuration file. So I kind of started there, and then slowly over time, once I kind of got back into scripting, much like everyone else, it started with Python, looked at Ansible, and I still use those two kind of as my main two tools in my tool chain today.
So do you use Ansible for the testing piece as well?
So it really depends. I think the testing piece is still, there's the jury's still out on what's the easiest way to do it. But I think for starters, it's nice to run a couple of commands. I think where it gets complicated is, in my personal experience, it's a lot easier to parse output using just native Python. At least it is to me. And if I know I'm going to be doing a lot of parsing and expecting output, I'll usually lean with Python or one of the Python testing modules today.
Nice.
Yeah.
The so I have you never used something like Robot before or looked at it?
I did look at Robot. It was kind of interesting that it provides that. In my short experience with it, it provides a bit of an abstraction layer, right, for you to use it in between teams, right? You can give the application team an abstracted test that you're doing on the network side without them really having to think about what's happening behind the scenes, and vice versa, right? If you want to make a network change and you want to get an abstracted application, test checkout from them without really having to think about what's happening behind the scenes. Robot seemed really interesting in that area. So I've played around with it, but I haven't really used it too much since then.
Do you work in a multi-vendor environment?
So yeah, I previously used to. Yeah, so a lot of different vendors.
Did you do any automation work in that environment?
Yeah, so there was mostly Python and Ansible, and the main difference I kind of saw there is that Ansible definitely abstracts a lot of complexity for you, at least on the surface. But the great part about that is if you have a large team and you have varying degrees of expertise with automation, Ansible is pretty easy to collaborate on and relatively easy to read, right? I can write something in Ansible, and chances are I can explain it to my coworker. Now doing that with a Python script that I wrote, that's much harder. And I mean, I think you could probably agree that a lot of those scripts go to die when that person leaves the company, right? So, or at least everybody still uses them until they break, and when they break, nobody really knows how to fix them. So I think that's one thing tools like Ansible have going for them. But yeah, the native Python is still super flexible, and so I still try to use both when I can.
So I mean, so is this testing the sort of automation testing you do? Is this something that's built into your organization's process, or are you sort of the guys sort of spearheading this and trying to, get it more widely adopted? We run into a lot of the latter rather than the former.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's still something that I've kind of done, single-handedly or maybe with the help of one coworker. But trying to get like an official framework that everybody's going to use, that's still challenging. Yeah, I mean that's so. Like I said, I'm on the vendor side today, and so now I'm talking to clients that are adopting this, or I'm helping them adopt this, and it's still it's still a mixed bag. Some get totally behind it from day one, and they're great at contributing to it, and others just they'll take whatever code I give them, and that's kind of going to be the stock the stock testing that they'll run, and that's it. So yeah, still a mixed bag for sure.
Do you have any advice for someone who's trying to get a practice going, especially in an organization where it's, they're largely surrounded by people who are just, this is completely foreign and
Yeah.
they resist, right? Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, I think getting something like testing, just going and showing management or leadership the benefit of it. I think it's even easier than getting automation going and pushing out changes. Testing is read only. It's pretty much risk free. So when I started this in my previous organization, that's kind of exactly what I did. I took these large complex changes or changes that people make more than once, and just wrote something in Python. I'm sure it was mostly readable to me, but still, and just get something repeatable that you can use. So I think it's a really risk-free, easy way to start. And I personally even looked at some of the NRE Labs lessons. You guys have Robot. I think you have a couple of other testing frameworks on there. And just to see that it's not that complicated to at least get started with.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what sort of let's say someone's watching this and they're like, I wanted, testing sounds like a great way to get it is. By the way, I say that all the time. I tell everyone your first automation should not be doing configuration. It should be pulling information and munging it and then presenting it in a consumable way. And one example I like to give, there's a lot of places that have like VRRP or HSRP or whatever in their environment. And that's a great first thing that you can sort of point a script at, download all information and present it in one block. Like, here's all the participants in this VERP domain or whatever, and you can see all their status and all the times that their status has changed or whatever. And it's like a great first project. Any suggestions for that kind of, like, let's say modeling someone could do, like first steps?
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned, I mean, that intersects a lot with compliance work, right? Just looking at your existing network and verifying that everything is configured as it should be, right? You have your you have your preset NTP servers or SNMP servers on all of your devices. So even starting with something as simple as that, if you have 1,000 switches, just logging into every one of them, pulling their SNMP and NTP status, and making sure it is what you expect it to be. And so, taking that, building upon it to kind of, make post-change checkouts, right? If there's a particular change you make often, right, maybe bringing up a new circuit or something like that, just taking the 5 or 6 or 7 things that you would normally do during, that change, and just scripting it, right, and just letting other engineers know that you don't have to do these checkouts by hand. Here's a repeatable task that you can use every time. And I think not everybody's going to get behind that in an organization. I mean, that's a whole other topic of culture, but a few will definitely see that benefit, and they'll either ask you how they can contribute or what they can do or how they can get started, and hopefully kind of build momentum from there.
Nice. Do you frequent NINOG and SHINOG events, by the way?
I try to. My only regret is I didn't go to enough of these when I was, kind of a younger engineer. I think a lot of us have made this mistake where, you assume if it's a paid for conference that, the answer will be, either no or pay for it yourself. And when you kind of get a little older in your career, you realize that all you have to do is ask, and usually the answer is yes, right? Even if it's kind of one conference a year or something like that. So since realizing that and since seeing the benefit of once I started attending these conferences, it's really a no-brainer to hear a lot of interesting talks and just get to know people that you normally wouldn't intersect with in your professional circle. It's a win-win, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. So when you're, can't stress this enough, and I'm sure you can. Why don't you speak to that? I think the importance of like these, especially user kind of like Shinog and Ninog are really about operators. It's right in the name, right? Network Operators
Yeah.
Group. I'd argue that online community is great, right? I mean, it's when software isn't destroying your live stream,
Right.
but doing all the stuff that can happen online, forums and podcasts and live streams and Twitter and all, and, there's all kinds of Slacks and IRC channels and everything now, Discord servers, etc. But going to these events and meeting people in person, I think is really important. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I mean, we have access to this, network community, however big it is, whether it's on social media or on Slack. But there's a lot of people that maybe aren't on that community and they just attend their local events, and then you have the opportunity to run into them. Or B is just maybe it's somebody you've spoken to briefly over like something like Twitter. Getting to meet them in person, kind of sharing some experiences. I think it's great for your career. I think it's great to get kind of a perspective of what are other engineers in this field doing. So I think just professionally to kind of grow and see what's out there. It gives you a nice view into what's going on. So I personally enjoyed it, and like I said, my only regret is I didn't start doing it sooner.
Yeah, and the great thing about that is there's so much you can find it online, but absolutely when you go in person, you get to. There's something about it's a lot more rewarding when you sit and you listen to someone's talk and you can ask questions, or catch up with the person afterwards and ask questions. And you get a lot of great pointers and tips. Just talking to people, and there's a lot of stuff if you're at the very beginning and you don't know what to do, right? You want to write your first thing that collects information, like before or after a change or something. People will, there's all kinds of tools for doing that kind of thing, and people can for first you can learn what those tools are, and second, there's people with all kinds of recipes for these tools and stuff, like yourself, right? That's and that helps tremendously. So you don't have to figure out everything from absolute scratch.
Yeah, and I think what you'll notice is that the majority of these people that are either giving talks or maybe you see somebody whose name that you've seen on a book title. The majority of these people are very accessible. I mean, they're humans after all. You might think of them as celebrities, but they're really not. We're all in this kind of small field together. And they're very accessible. They will always answer your questions. That's just been my experience. So it could definitely be intimidating approaching somebody or even asking a question in public. But I think for the most part, it's a pretty positive industry, especially people that go to these conferences. They've made time out of their day to actually come and be there. They'll be very approachable from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think so. I agree. Generally, they are. There are some older curmudgeons that are, but still, if you start talking nerd stuff, people get drawn into it. So,
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, if I can turn the questions around for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you guys have been doing NRE Labs for a little over a year at this point, I think.
Yeah.
What's been your experience? Is it doing better than you expected, worse than you expected? Is it something totally different from what you thought you were getting into?
I think it is what we thought we were going to get into, and it's doing it- it's coming along exactly as we expected. I mean, we have the community is growing slowly. We're improving the tooling and stuff. We're actually creating lessons on the site.
Mhm.
We're pulling other vendors in. So Cumulus gave us an appliance.
Okay.
We have an FRR appliance now, the free range routing appliance.
Mhm.
Cumulus is based on FRR, but running a Linux machine with FRR and running Cumulus are two completely different things.
Correct. Yeah.
So we have both. So we do have um, multiple vendors, and then of course we have vendors outside of networking, right? We're working with Red Hat now. We're going to have Ansible Tower up here soon, in a you know and other tooling and etc. So I think it's going the direction we wanted. I think being multi-vendor and being open and free without a marketing wall is the right way to do it. And I think it'll the more we become more like an open source, an official sort of open source community. We are open source totally, but
Mhm.
we're moving into possibly the software free conservancy. Well, hopefully, we'll see how that unfolds. But they're going to evaluate that pretty soon. And we got our governance doc and our code of conduct, and we have all these other things. And I think as we, you know, as all that gets settled and as we get other vendors to participate, then I think this project will start to grow even faster. And it's certainly when we get more of the tooling straightened out for creating the lessons. You can create a lesson, anyone can create a lesson now, but it does take a little bit of Linux knowledge to get the development environment set up and to make your
Mhm.
own images for the lessons and stuff like that. Um, that'll we're you know that's a key focus for us this next year is making those tools even easier to use so that you don't spend a lot of time creating those images. That FR image I created myself, and that took some time to actually get functional, and it needs to be better than that. But
Mhm.
I think we're at where we need to be. People are asking the right questions. People are using the lessons.
Yeah.
We launch anywhere from 400 to 800 lessons a week.
Okay.
um, yeah, I think it's coming along good. I think people are interested. People want to know more. And hopefully this year too, I kind of want to make sure some of the lessons are more focused on testing and modeling and less on, we're gonna, push out changes because that's what I mean. That's what we do most of our time. We should make it easier for us to model things, especially at 2 a.m. on
Sure.
Sunday.
Yeah. 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 Well, one piece I was going to address is that I personally, the way I learned is by doing, and I think that applies to most engineers. So when I hear the question or when I'm talking, to kind of engineers that aren't as familiar with automation, the topic of, well, how do I get started always comes up. And, when my answer is, well, you have to learn by doing, you have to do this, you have to do that, I feel like not everybody's a doer. At least they aren't until they start and they see the benefit of it. So, your platform, NRE Labs, definitely helps in that case where I could just, point them to it and say, hey, go to this site, take this lesson, right? And at least you're getting started, right? You're lowering that barrier, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, that was the goal. That was the goal.
Mm. Yeah.
It is learning by doing. It is absolutely learning by doing. And a lot of network engineers are sort of autodidactic anyway, in a way. I brought this up last week. Like, there's not really. I mean, there is network engineer training that you can buy from vendors and from third parties, but you're not going to be a BGP expert, even if you like. There's advanced BGP training you can take from multiple vendors until you do it a lot, right? Until you really see, hey, why are we adding extended communities to this BGP route over here, and then we're matching on it over here, and then manipulating it until you've done that in production, and you start to get a feel for that kind of thing. You're not. Then you realize there's so much about BGP that's never in any of the training, right? And
Yeah.
automation is even bigger. It's even bigger. I mean, there's so many tools and languages, and it's bonk and syntaxes, right? And it's you it's even it's the universe is even larger, and you can take some automation training, but you know, you have to do it. You have to do it, or you're never really going to be, you're never going to get good at it.
Yeah, no, agreed for sure. What's your personal opinion on, I guess, some of the successful automation teams you've seen? Is it, a couple of engineers within a network team, becoming kind of automation experts, or at least very knowledgeable in automation, and then slowly spreading that through the rest of the team? Or have you seen more of,
Oh my God.
dedicated? Oh, whatever.
Go ahead and speak.
No, I was going to say, or are you seeing more dedicated automation teams that are just, you know, uh, I guess, topic agnostic, and the network team just goes to them and says, "Hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z."
So by the way, your audio, this is a curse. This is a cursed thing. I can hear your audio great. I've been able
Yeah.
to hear it the whole time, but there we go. Hey, it's fixed now. Wow. Well,
Okay.
there's people watching and they're commenting. I just want to say, we've had a cursed stream so far. We're using Zoom for the client, and it restarted in the middle of the conference because it updated itself, and then my headset died, and then yeah, and now his audio stopped, but you're back now. They're saying they can hear you now.
Okay. All right.
um
Weird.
I would say that there's two things. It starts off with one or two or three people, let's say, who get a this idea that, hey, they have the vision, right, that like it strikes them that automation, we ought to be doing it because we're doing all these changes at 2 in the morning. There's like, especially, I would say, especially medium or large shops is where they really see it, because
Yep.
tangibly they feel the side effect of not doing it, more than smaller shops. um, is usually how this happens. And then one or two or three people start getting their feet wet in automation, and there's two breakpoints that are really important. One is, when they realize that testing is more important than configuration changes, which is why I just tell people right off the bat, don't worry about automating your configuration changes. If you're not becoming really good at modeling what's going on in the network first, then you're setting yourself up for catastrophic failure. I mean, you're going to push out a change to 1,000 devices, and you're going to blow up your network. Like they just start by modeling. It's what you spend all your time on, anyways. So when they have that realization that testing and modeling is really the most important thing to automate, because look, the information's complicated. Networks are complicated. Like, how can you even when you have all the certifications, IEs? I had 3 IEs at one point. Like, you can't hold all that in your head, especially especially at 2 in the morning. So testing and modeling, they have that realization. That's a huge breakthrough. That's a significant milestone in that organization's sort of walk towards having an automation practice. And the second milestone is when management takes it seriously. Like, their first level manager realizes this is important, and we should standardize on some tools, whatever those are. Python and Ansible seems to be the go-to answer right now. But there's robot, there's all kinds of tools that you could be adopting, and that, by the way, the tools you adopt could be heavily influenced by other teams in your org who might already be using Ansible or some other tools. But when management gets involved, and they decide, what, this needs to be part of our process, instead of people like having 20 people at 2 in the morning just typing away and cutting and pasting into terminal windows and, typing away. What if they filled out, this Google spreadsheet, and then we launched this tool that reads in the spreadsheet and then sets up a bunch of, Ansible runs a bunch of playbooks or whatever, and does it that way. And then you can have like 1 or 2 people at 2 in the morning and not 20. And what they're doing is just guiding the process. And when that process breaks, you don't go back to doing it manually. You fix the process, right? And you stay on top of that. And that's DevOps, right? It's the process of the process. When they realize testing and modeling is important, and when management gets involved, and they start to formalize it and make it part of what they do, that's when it really takes off. until then, it's challenging because you'll end up with someone. I've been in this position. You said you were in that position earlier.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you're it's like banging your head on a wall. Like you're trying to make it happen, and you're showing people the benefits, and look, here's the results. I ran this change. I validated it. It was good on every device, and I also looked over here to make sure those routes appeared or whatever. And I ran this report, and here it is. Like, it just happened. And I didn't need 10 guys pounding away, or 10 people pounding away on a keyboard to make it happen. That's, you know, it can be frustrating being in that position. So,
Yeah.
the organizations that have done it well have had those true realizations, testing and modeling, and then management took it seriously. So you ought to be selling this upward as you're doing it, as much as possible. And the pain point for management, if I'm going to give any advice and keep talking while you're the guest,
Yeah.
is, you know, managers don't like, this is a lot of network engineers love how frustrating it is being a network engineer sometimes, because nobody really understands what you do except for other network engineers. Um, but I want you to just put yourself in the position of somebody who manages a network team. When you blow something up in the network, they, first of all, may not really understand what you did that was wrong, right? Their job is to manage the process, not to be a network engineer. And they have to answer to customers, and to up the chain in your organization. And sometimes when you're trying to explain to them something really arcane about what you did that caused that outage, and they have to turn around and explain to people what the root cause of the problem was, and that it's never going to happen again, which is a lie. You're going to blow the network up again soon, trust me.
Right.
It's like, being in that position is painful. So when you're selling this up the chain, you want to focus on that. Let them know, like, and it's truthful. When you have a good automation practice, that pain lessens, and answers are easier to give, and having quantifiable, measurable outcomes, and having reports on, that with those measurements and those outcomes is a big deal, right? Modeling, it's such a big deal. And testing and modeling, they set you up to make that sale. You walk into the office of a guy whose job is to get yelled at, and for him to make stuff up because he doesn't understand what really happened when you took the network out. This is an easy sell for them. Just tell them, look, this is going to lessen the pain. It's going to make us more effective, and there'll be less anger over time, right? It's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to happen over time.
No, I agree, and I've definitely had a number of those conversations in the past myself. Um, I feel like you definitely need somebody, a little bit forward thinking, in that managerial role, because, in my experience, when there's a hiccup, when a change goes south, if you have an established automated practice, if you are doing some testing, it's very easy to say, well, you know what, we weren't testing for X, Y, and Z. Now we're going to start testing for X, Y, and Z, and that's why this will, quote unquote, never happen again. If you've been resisting automation, and your engineer, kind of does X, Y, and Z, there's only so much you can do, right? I mean, what can you possibly say to management? You can say that, and maybe we'll put some change control processes. Maybe we'll send this engineer to more training, right? Kind of vague answers, that I've seen in my experience. So I feel like, in these particular situations, relying on testing and having that practice, takes a little bit of foresight, but it's definitely a benefit to everybody.
Yeah. And it's, what I think it actually I think it's important. I used to say all the time that there's little e engineering and big E engineering, out in the universe. And I think, network engineering has been in a sort of little e mode for a long time. We just listen to whatever our vendors tell us, and we don't really engineer that much, right? And I think this practice, bringing an automation practice in to help you, it's not about automating your job away. It's about you being a more effective engineer. And I think it sort of brings the big E, portion of engineering back into our practice. Because it's kind of insane logging into 1 million devices at the CLI and making changes by hand. It's crazy. So I think it's an opportunity for us to grow our field, which has been, automation is becoming more popular, but even now I go out and I talk to customers. I'm also on the vendor side all the time, and it's still 80% or more organizations do none. They just have teams of people
Yep.
hammering away at the CLI every week.
Yeah, no, agree. That's definitely what I'm seeing, and it's sometimes some days it's really tough to be optimistic, but other days you kind of see what it looks like when it's successful, and it's really a breath of fresh air. Kind of gives me that optimism that networking is evolving, because there are a number of teams, a number of companies, and they are successful at it, and to see what that looks like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, agreed. That's probably the best part of being an evangelist for automation, is when you get that, you can see the light bulb go off in their head, and that's really satisfying. It's like, hey, it's, I'm not just yelling into a void. Somebody got it, and hopefully their life will be better as a result of it.
Yeah,
for sure. Well, we've kind of all over the place there for topics. So thank you for coming on. I'm sorry for all the, this is pretty incredible that we had 3 things go wrong on this stream in one stream. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit it. I'm going to have to edit this now anyways. And we'll see what happens there. But I I just want to apologize to everyone. This won't happen again. That's pretty rare. I'm going to get a new headset. I'm going to get another, because this is the second time the headset died on me. This time the battery didn't die. The Bluetooth disconnected, and it makes a sound that when this happens and it's searching again for Bluetooth, it just did it for like in the middle. Like, it was connected. It was working. Why? Why would it do that? I just need to get rid of that headset and get another one. And so I'll be editing this together. We actually recorded it with 2 different. We both recorded it with Zoom, and we recorded it with Twitch. So between those 2 sources, we should be able to have one coherent episode when I do the editing. So, all right. Well, thanks for coming on, Anthony.
sure.
And, please come on again. I promise we won't have so many issues next time.
No, of course. Yeah. This was fun. Yeah. Thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm always up for these conversations. Just exploring what a lot of us talk about behind closed doors and just making it more public.
So what's your Twitter handle?
Mine is permit any.
Permit any.
Yeah, that's me on
That's
Twitter.
a good one. That's a good one.
That's why I'm not a security guy, right?
Okay, so you can follow Anthony at Permit Any on Twitter, and I encourage you to do so. I will put a link into his talk at ShyNog. It's on YouTube, about the importance of testing and network automation, and I highly recommend you watch. It's not that long, but it's fantastic. Lots of great insight, a little bit of humor. So please check it out. And again, I'm Cloud Toad at CLOUDTOAD. You can follow me on Twitter. And again, the project is NRE Labs. This is the NRE Labs live stream. You can go there to learn about network automation, labs.networkreliability.engineering, and you can follow us on Twitter at NRE Labs. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. See you later.
Cool. Thanks.